All right, welcome player crew to this final part of the Janus series where we are going to be concentrating on fur. So this is something that I've been wanting to focus on for a little while now because I get a lot of requests on how to do it. The main things that I want you guys thinking about is shape language. If you guys have watched that PyroMonkey Basics shape language video, it really plays into this where we're really focusing on the big shape. And that's what I'm doing here initially. We're essentially just doing a few glazes and almost kind of between glazes and washes. You can see I do let the paint collect a little bit in the recesses, but not a ton. And I really want there to be strong highlights and strong shadows. Now with the face here, I'm going to be painting it the same color as everything else for the time being. At the end, I'm going to differentiate it a little bit, very subtly, but just for the sake of simplicity, because we're going for something that's a bit more, of course, high tabletop, I'm not really concerning myself too much with making sure that it's completely different. And of course, it's going to kind of match the fur. I mean, if you look at a lot of other animals, especially like dogs and cats, which I'm kind of thinking of here, the fur on the face and the color of the face tends to match the of course, the hair on the rest of the animal. And here we're just doing the same thing, second round. And the color that I'm using here is, if I'm remembering correctly, English Uniform, which normally isn't a super saturated color, but it's just relative to all of the other desaturated tones that we've been using on the piece that it feels much more saturated than it normally would. A lot of this series has really been that conversation of color relativity and having saturated things next to desaturated things makes them feel a bit more saturated, meaning it makes the color a bit more feel a little bit more intense or a little bit more pure, like a pure yellow, for instance, when in reality this is very far from it. And it's one of those really fun tricks that you can do, and I've really been trying to go over with this series, and I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this, and I hope that you're able to start to utilize this train of thought and these new techniques with your future projects. Again, just taking a look here after this coat, and we're just going to let it dry. All right, so we hair dried that, and now we're going to come back in and we are going to really start to pick out some of the smaller shadows here. As you can see, we're kind of separating these different lines between the hair, these different ridges, really painting in this darker side, this first part of the darker coat. Really just thinking of the whole pelt as kind of a big, kind of irregular cylindrical shape is what I'm doing. Now here we are working with, again, a darker tone. Really all I'm doing here is I'm adding in small bits of chocolate brown and black into this mix. And as I said before, here I'm starting to pick out a bit more detail around the face, especially around that ear. In particular, I really want to separate it from the rest of the pelt, just that whoever's looking at the mini knows that there's a distinct separation between the ear and the hair, which could very easily happen because of the similarities in color. Doing something similar here, making sure that these horns that are coming out of this back are somewhat separate. So really, realistically, what I'm doing here is there's really nothing complex going on. I'm really just painting this big shape. I know that we have already talked about this and kind of the thinking, but you really can start things off this way, where essentially you're just making a very basic value plan. Essentially, you're just painting basic highlights and shadows, which is it's a good lesson to learn, up front to begin with, and to really get used to creating that level of contrast, or at least the proper level of contrast. But the nice thing about this is that if you build a nice foundation like this, you can always add more later. You can add more color nuance. You can add more color variation. You can build the highlights back up. There's just quite a broad variety, or you can just leave it. Generally, if things have a pretty decent, contrast with the highs and lows, it tends to be fairly nice to look at. Besides the little contrast tricks that we do with desaturated and saturated, at the end of the day, whoever's looking at your minis, really what they're looking for are consistencies with the shape, as well as correct highlights and shadows and midtones, arranged very nicely around the model. A key part of creating the hair, essentially what I in a big part of that process is making sure that I'm creating those highlights and shadows that we were just talking about, essentially painting those on without caring too much about the individual details of the hair, right? So we're creating this kind of underlayer, which you just saw. Now what we're doing is we're coming back over with a little bit of a brighter tone, and we're not quite dry brushing. This is a very, very light overbrushing, and we'll do this, and then we will do a highlight, and that's really going to be it. So essentially we're creating a couple of layers of highlights and shadows, and then we're just leaving that face on that animal so that it has a little bit of a different contrast from everything else. But with that being said, that is the end of this tutorial series. Thank you guys again so much for watching. If you guys have more questions about painting hair, please, drop me a message. I want to know. I want to help you guys out the best that I can. I hope this tutorial served as a good starting point for you. Just once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much for supporting. You guys are absolutely amazing. And we will see you guys next month with the Navigator High Tabletop series. And as always, happy painting. Bye.